In order for you to have a healthy marriage, you have to be looking, what can I give? What do I give and add to this relationship to where we are better and stronger together, as opposed to what can I take from the relationship? Common law marriage, now it's referred to as informal marriage. Common law means that it wasn't written down in a law, but if you went to court, the judges would commonly hold that. You meet those three elements, which is agreement to be married with each other in the state of Texas, you cohabitate with each other in the state of Texas, and you hold yourself out to any other person that you are presently married, boom, you are married. Same thing as if you had done a ceremony and signed a marriage license.
Faith is what makes movement into the unknown possible. And you need to move into the unknown because that's where you're moving. And because the unknown is unknown, because the future is unknown, you cannot step forward into the unknown without faith. You do have to throw yourself into the abyss.
Correct.
To be married. Correct. Just like you have to throw yourself into the abyss to be alive.
The consistency and the commitment and the relationship and the experience and that bond and that love that you have with the person that you're married to is far greater than the imagination of what you could have with that other person that's over there. You're not getting wiser. You're not growing if you don't go through this process.
Can you please elaborate on why you advise against cohabitation before marriage?
As a divorce lawyer, I also advise against cohabitation before marriage. So watch this video and you'll find out why.
Well, so why would I advise against cohabitation before marriage? Well, the simple answer to that question is there's plenty of evidence that it's a bad idea. And I just mean factual evidence to begin with, although I think there are other reasons. People who live together and then get married are more likely to get divorced, not less likely. And that's a really interesting fact because it flies in the face of what you might think of as a kind of pragmatic common sense, you know.
As a divorce lawyer, the number one thing I want to see is not a divorce. It is healthy marriages. That's ideal. That's why I own healthymarriage.com, which is a website that we're in development and going to be launching soon. And if we can take an unhealthy marriage and make it into a healthy one, that's the ideal. And he's right. You're more likely to get a divorce if you've lived together with your spouse.
Because you might think,
before you got married.
Well, you don't buy a car without taking it out for a test drive.
But your spouse is not a car.
Right, and everyone laughs because that seems obvious. But then, you know, a woman's not a car.
There you go. Exactly.
And neither is a man, and really, like seriously, really not an object. And so it isn't obvious at all that that metaphor applies, even though it's, at first shallow glance, it seems obviously true.
And that's a great point. Most of these metaphors that we use, such as when lawyers say they're going to fight for you, what does that mean? It means that they care for you. And it means that they're going to do the best that they can in order to get you a good result. But in a divorce, fighting is actually one of the last things you want to do. What you really want to do in a divorce is end the fighting, not increase it. Sometimes you have to increase it in order to end it, but that's never the first choice. He's exactly right. That metaphor does not fit well at all.
Well, but if it's obviously true, then you might say, well, why are people who live together before they get married more likely to get divorced? And one possible answer to that is, well, people who are more likely to get divorced are the same people who are more likely to live together rather than to get married, and that's possible. It's very difficult to separate those two things out, but in some sense it doesn't matter. What the facts reveal is that if the goal is to learn what you need to learn so that you can decide who you should marry more effectively, or learn how to act if you do get married more effectively, and the goal is that your marriage will be better and last, then it doesn't work.
Correct. It doesn't.
And that's a strange truth. And then you might ask yourself, well, why? Why doesn't it work? It's also the case, by the way, that the more sexual partners, the larger the number of sexual partners that someone has had before they get married, the more likely they are to get divorced as well. And it's also the case, by the way, and this is also interesting. So
it's also one of the reasons why open marriages and swinger type of marriages also don't work. very, very detrimental to a marriage relationship.
I spent a lot of time studying criminal behavior in all sorts of different manifestations, some of it on the political front with regard to the behavior of people who committed terrible atrocities in the service of political belief. Some of it on the frontier of criminal sadism itself. I spent a lot of time studying the behavior of serial killers and mass torturers and people like that. But I also spent a lot of time as a research scientist looking at what psychiatrists and psychologists know as antisocial behavior. And antisocial behavior is the pattern of behavior that characterizes criminals. And it usually makes itself manifest pretty early in life, perhaps as early as 2 years old, by the way. And once it's established, it's extremely stable. It isn't obvious at all that psychologists or psychiatrists have learned anything about how to remediate antisocial behavior, so criminal behavior, or its precursors in childhood. Once it's there, and that especially seems to be the case after about 4 years of age, once it's there, it's unbelievably stable and resilient to and resistant to change.
It's also one of the reasons why if you have a spouse or you're in a relationship with someone who is antisocial and exhibits these antisocial type of behaviors, why it's a complete rabbit hole and erroneous endeavor to try and change them or think that you're going to fix them or think that they're going to change on their own just by magically marrying you. If there is something wrong in your relationship prior to you getting married, that problem is going to only magnify after you're getting married. The fact that you get married to them is not going to change that. And it's much better to break up and end a relationship while you're dating rather than when you get married to someone.
It has a lot of different aspects, antisocial behavior. But one of the markers for antisocial behavior, delinquency, childhood conduct disorder, early onset criminality, is early sexual behavior and multiple partners. And so, you can take that for what it's worth. Why is that the case?
And one of the problems with that type of behavior is that people are less satisfied in a marriage because they're always thinking, well, maybe I should find happiness somewhere else. And they haven't found happiness in themselves yet. They're not complete people. In order for a marriage to work, you have to have one full and complete person come together with another full and complete person to where 1 + 1 equals at least 2. As opposed to, oh, I'm half a person here, I'm half a person here. I think, well, if we combine, we'll be one full person. No, you're going to be like one negative person. It's almost that the parts that are missing multiply against each other into the negative and drag both of you down. It will make things worse. You want to be solid in who you are before you even consider joining with someone else, and they have to be solid in who they are. 2 full people make at least 1 + 1, at least or more than 2.
You could speculate someone who's oriented in a criminal direction is more likely to take advantage of someone else for their own gratification. I think that's the basic commonality. I don't know that for sure.
If they are like that, the fact that is that they're going to be in a relationship with their spouse or partner looking only for what they get. In order for you to have a healthy marriage, you have to be looking, what can I give? What do I give and add to this relationship to where we are better and stronger together, as opposed to what can I take from the relationship? If both people are, what can I give, and then that moves you both forward in a healthy manner. That's what a healthy marriage is. That's how you get a healthy marriage. That's what makes a healthy marriage. But if it's, I want to be with them for what I can get, selfish, you're going to lead down a pathway to a place that you really don't want to go, and it's not going to work, and it's going to be a terrible marriage.
Because we don't know why these different symptoms of criminality, let's say, link together, apart from the fact that criminals are predators, and the really pathological criminals are predatory parasites, and that's really what defines a psychopath, by the way, is a psychopath is a predatory parasite. The archetypal psychopath is a sadistic predatory parasite. So the sadist takes delight in the pain of others, so positive pleasure in the pain of others. The predator uses others to their own advantage, and the parasite takes no responsibility for his or her own existence. And
that's a very, very common problem. The parasitic person in a relationship, that everything is the other person's fault. They blame. They don't take full and complete responsibility for everything that happens to them. And typically they have terrible relationships. And strangely enough, in my experience as a divorce lawyer, I have had person after person after person that will come to me and we'll have a conversation of how long the relationship has been bad. Well, it's been bad since the first month of marriage or first year or first week. Sometimes they don't even make it to the first day after the marriage ceremony. And then I go, well, how long did you stay in that marriage? 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And it just shocks me, but it's out there and it happens.
Manipulates or compels others to serve that goal. And so that's kind of an ugly combination of traits, and one of the core elements of that is early multiple partner promiscuity. And so that's interesting.
And at the moment that you find that somebody is doing that to you, that's really the information that you need. Thank you very much. I'm looking how to screen out people that are bad for me. So you move on from that relationship. Go to the next one. Forget their name. Move on and don't look back.
And that also might explain why more pre-marriage sexual partners increases the probability of divorce, is that it's a marker for the pattern of behavior that is characterized by the exploitation of others and is therefore more likely to be unsustainable over the medium to long run. So that's interesting. Then you can think about it, kind of think about it metaphysically. I thought about this, or philosophically, I thought about what are you telling someone when you live with them? Okay, so I've talked to lots of people. Women who are cohabiting with men are generally not very happy about the fact that the relationship is not moving towards marriage. Now, I think there's a bunch of reasons for that. Women seem to suffer more emotionally as a consequence of sexual activity outside of a committed relationship. You can imagine why that is. Women experience more negative emotion than men on average in general, but also women pay a much higher, sex is much riskier for women than it is for men. Obviously. Hopefully I don't have to explain why that is. So women are often women who are cohabiting are often less than happy about that. And the men who I've talked to about their partners' displeasure with the current unstable nature of the relationship often say something like, well, we don't need a piece of paper to indicate our commitment to each other, which sounds all revolutionary and Che Guevara, but which is really a pretty pathetic bit of reasoning. First of all, for someone to say that...
The interesting thing is that in the state of Texas, you actually don't need a piece of paper. If you meet 3 elements, you are presently married. It's that you have an agreement with each other that you are presently married in the state of Texas. You cohabitate for any length of time, can be 1 hour, can be 1 minute, can be an overnight, can be in a hotel room, doesn't matter, any of those things. But you cohabitate for any length of time in the state of Texas. You agree with each other that you are presently married, and you represent to the world that you are married to any other person. You are then married. And in the state of Texas, it used to be called common law marriage. Now it's referred to as informal marriage. Common law means that it wasn't written down in a law, but if you went to court, the judges would commonly hold that. Well, that's not what it is anymore. There is an actual written down law called informal marriage. So what is now called informal marriage used to be called common law marriage, but it's an actual law. You meet those 3 elements, which is agreement to be married with each other in the state of Texas, you cohabitate with each other in the state of Texas, and you hold yourself out to any other person that you are presently married, boom, you are married. Same thing as if you had done a ceremony and signed a marriage license. You can then file a declaration of informal marriage with the county that you live in to put something on file, but it's not required to file the declaration. You are married in Texas. It's quite easy. So the we don't have to have a piece of paper excuse isn't even a valid excuse in the state of Texas.
Means they think that what they just said convinces you that all marriage is a piece of paper.
All marriage is not a piece of paper. It's a full commitment to be all in with that other person and to love and support them. It is so much more than just a one-time commitment. It's a lot more than a one-time promise. It's a actual commitment and decision and mindset inside of you that you are with this person as one.
And that's a preposterously foolish argument.
I agree.
At minimum, in the typical marriage ceremony, you make a vow by whatever is holy to you, or at least in front of the state itself, and then in front of your community as you define it, that you're going to make a commitment to someone. And if you think that's nothing, then you're probably the sort of person that the person you ask to marry you should run away from.
I agree.
So...
And you're also the type of person that's going to run away from the person that you asked to marry them.
So that's pretty shallow. And then you might ask, well, why do you need to commit to your partner in front of your community and a higher authority, let's say? And the answer is, well, life is really, really difficult, and you're going to have a rough time with your partner no matter how much you love them, because the two of you are different, and you're different sexually, and you're different temperamentally, and so you're not going to see eye to eye all the time, and then horribly difficult things are going to come your way, and the complexity of those difficult things is going to tempt you to pull apart.
That's true. And we deal with that day after day after day after day, every single day, as divorce lawyers.
And exactly when pulling apart might be the worst possible thing for you, and maybe you need that vow before your community and God himself, let's say, or at least the state, and the vow that you've made to yourself and your partner, and the vow that you've made publicly to all your friends to keep you together when the going gets rough.
And the going absolutely will get rough. Disney is a liar. There's no such thing as happily ever after. And the closest that you can get to happily ever after is both of you being 100.00% all in on the marriage at all times, especially during the hard times.
And you might say, well, you don't need that. And I would say, well, that's just because the going hasn't got rough enough for you yet, because when it does get that rough, you'll bloody well know that you needed that. That's for sure. And that will definitely happen to you.
That's very true. Very true.
That will definitely happen to you if you marry someone, because all the things that life can throw at you will be thrown at you in the course of a marriage. And so the vow and the community commitment, you don't just throw that away casually. And you certainly don't say, well, that's just a piece of paper. You know, what do I need a piece of paper to validate my love? It's like, your love's that great, is it? You're really that much of a saint that this person, they can just, you say you love them and, oh man, they're just done. They're in bliss. They're in paradise for the rest of their life. They can just rely. You're never going to waver. Now that you expressed your love, you're just going to be there 100% of the time. You don't need anyone else to help you. You don't need a vow. You don't need any tradition. So your love is so pure and holy that other person, they can just rely on you from that second onward. No hesitation. It's like, yeah, right. That's just complete bloody rubbish. You can't even rely on yourself in relationship to yourself for that.
Yep.
So.
Very true.
Okay, so next, what are you telling your partner? Well, as far as I can tell, if you live with someone, here's what you're saying to each other. You're the best I can manage at the moment.
Yep. And I'm not willing to commit to you for long term, but let's just try this out. And then if it doesn't work, I can get out of it. What kind of person are you for that? It's not good.
Maybe the same applies to me for you. And we both really don't want to take on any more responsibility than necessary. Plus, we both want to have the option of trading up if opportunity comes along.
Yep.
And so why don't we just make do with this provisional arrangement
until something better
comes along. Well, we cast our eye out into the broader world and see if we can fish something better in.
Or I'm not happy enough with myself, but we'll play pretend for a little while. Or I know this is going nowhere, but I'll tolerate this until something better comes along. I mean, almost every end of what you can think of on that is just not going to work.
You know, you can say I'm cynical about that, but I don't think I'm cynical about that. Because living together means something like, well,
we've had marriages to where they've been together for 8 years and they're getting divorced after 2 years of marriage. They lived together for 14 years, then they got married, and now they want to get a divorce within 2 years. It's just, it does something to you.
We're not permanently committed, and not permanently committed means, well, we're impermanently committed, and impermanently committed means we're looking for a better commitment, or perhaps to be alone, but forget that, because that's usually not true. Well, what kind of basis is that to have a relationship with someone? How are you going to found a relationship on that? Especially an intimate relationship. How is that going to work? It's like, you'll do for now.
Yep.
I don't think that's a very solid foundation to...
It is not.
To move forward.
It is not.
And then it's indeterminate too. It's, well, if you're just living together, do you have kids? Because that's a commitment, that's for sure. And that's a real commitment, or it better be. And it's going to be inevitably anyways.
And you know, the interesting thing is there's a lot of people that will even have kids and still not be committed to each other.
And so if there's ambiguity about your commitment to each other, there's going to be ambiguity about your plans for children, and that's a huge ambiguity in most relationships. And so that's not helpful. That just means neither of you know what the hell you're doing, and that provokes anxiety and uncertainty, and
It does not draw the two of you closer together, and it does not build a strong long-term relationship. It's basically like living in pause of right now. You're afraid to mature or get any older. Your finances are separate and distinct, and you're not going to be building wealth. So many problems with it.
Decreases hope, because hope is experienced in relationship to a goal. And if the goal is ambiguous, maybe we'll have kids and maybe we'll not, well then there's no real hope there. And so that seems to be a pretty decent pathway to misery.
Yep.
So, and then the next issue is, and this is the final one that I'll discuss, is you're not married if you're living together. And so you might say, well, you're practicing being married. It's like, no, you're not. Why?
Correct. You're not.
Why? Because it's not something you can simulate. So one of the things I learned from reading Carl Jung, Jung thought about marriage as a container, as an container for alchemical transformation, as a container that would produce a heat so intense that the base metal of your psyche could be transformed into something ideal. But it had to be a container that could take heat, because it requires heat to transform. And you might say, well, how much heat does someone as base as you need to transform? And the answer might be, a lot of heat. I need a lot of heat and pressure before I'm going to change, before I'm going to become purified in any real sense. And so what's the heat and pressure? Here's what it is. You don't get to run away. You're stuck with that person. And they're stuck with you. And you made a vow. It's like, uh-oh, I'm stuck with you. Just like I'm stuck with me. And the vow is exactly that, right? In some real sense. The vow is, I'm going to treat you like you're me. And you don't even like yourself very much. So that's a vicious vow. And so you might say, well, how desperate do you have to be when confronted by someone else to change your ways? And the answer might be, well, you have to be as desperate as being shackled to someone makes you. You know, one of the reasons that Tammy and I have got along and are still together is because we both know that we're stuck with each other. And so we decided quite a long time ago that we didn't want to have the same stupid fight every day for the next 40 years. And that's like the definition of a bad marriage. It's like we have the same fight every day for 40 years. That's hell. And so the alternative is, now let's just have a bloody fight right here and now and see if we can sort out whatever the hell is so stupid about us that's keeping us in this dismal hell. And why? Well, because otherwise we're just stuck with this misery. And if you can walk away and if you can leave, which you can if you're not bound together, then you're not going to withstand the horrible process of heat and pressure that's required to make you transform.
So in him talking about this heat and pressure and the difficulties and this transformation, I think one thing that he hasn't gotten to yet or is not the subject of this, but that is very important is that after that transformation and after you go through that heating process and you get through to the other side, the relationship is that much better. You're not getting wiser. You're not growing if you don't go through this process. And it is worth it. It's absolutely worth it. If you have both people that are 100% all in, you actually become that much closer. The love becomes stronger. The good times are that much better. And you're stronger to get through the bad times. This type of process tempers you. And it's what makes a healthy marriage. And healthy marriages are worth it.
You'll just walk around that. You'll just look for an excuse. I mean, people look for an excuse not to do that anyways. And so part of the reason you get married is so you're desperate enough to change. And maybe that doesn't even work.
And the change is wisdom. That's what the change is. And the change is growth. It's not the foolishness and the foolish ideas that we have when we were younger. I had them. A lot of people have them. I see it in marriages all the time. And I have gone through, for as many clinical psychology patients as he's had, we have had that many in the form of clients where we're going through this and helping them. I see all of this exactly in the context of marriage. And he is absolutely correct in his assessment. We see it played out over and over and over again with case after case after case, marriage after marriage after marriage.
So those are the reasons that, no, there's one more. There's one more. This is the next thing. It's a necessary act of faith.
Correct.
And, you know, in our culture, because we're not very wise, we think that faith means, especially when it's parodied as religious faith, we think faith means the willingness to suspend disbelief while swallowing a proposition that any fool would reject. That's often how the rationalist atheists view religious claims.
Not it at all.
faith means the suspension of your rationality and the acceptance of an absurd claim. But that isn't what faith means.
Nope.
Not really. Faith is what makes movement into the unknown possible. And you need to move into the unknown because that's where you're moving. And because the unknown is unknown, because the future is unknown, you cannot step forward into the unknown without faith. It wouldn't be unknown if you knew it. If you knew it, it wouldn't require faith, but you don't know it. And so you step forward into the unknown future as a consequence of your faith in some principles. And if you love someone, if you fall in love with someone and you decide to marry them, you don't have the evidence at hand that that's the right person for you. What you have instead is the joint decision that come hell or high water, you're going to struggle forward together. And then you don't even know if that's the right decision. Because you're not going to know till you've been married, like your whole life. You're not going to have the data. And so you do have to throw yourself into the abyss.
Correct.
To be married.
Correct.
Just like you have to throw yourself into the abyss to be alive. You have to move forward in faith. And then you might say, well, how do you call the best out of yourself and out of your partner, that maybe a partner that you're fortunate enough to love? And the answer might be by offering them the gift of faith. And by saying, look, flawed as we both are, if we commit to each other, we have the possibility of becoming more than we are.
Correct.
And I'd like to do that with you, even though there's no evidence that it's going to work. But then you might think, too, the more deeply you're committed to that faith, the more likely it is to work. And you can't find out what that commitment is without the commitment, and so you can't simulate it by living together. Because it's not real.
Correct.
It's not real until you make the commitment. And then I would also say, well, what if you don't make the commitment? Well, then you're not committed. And you might say, well, why should I be committed? Well, what's the alternative? It's to be uncommitted. Well, are you free then? Or are you just aimless and hopeless and confused? And you admire people who are committed to something. You sort of wish yourself, when you're feeling aimless and you feel that your life is meaningless, you might think, well, I really wish I was committed to something. Wouldn't it be nice to be committed to something? It's like, well, commit to something then. And you say, well, I don't have the evidence. It's like, you don't commit because of the evidence. You commit because of faith. And there's foolish faith, there's naive faith and there's blind faith. And I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about staking your life on something that might work if God was willing, if the faith smiled on you and you put your whole soul into it.
That's the key. You have to be 100% all in with this. That's what takes the faith. And you have to have the faith to know, based on very wise history and decisions and commitment on your part, that if you go all in and they go all in, that this will be better than you will be without it.
And that's what you do when you vow to stay faithful to someone. And you can't simulate that. It doesn't work. So there's like 5 reasons why it doesn't work. And I don't know if you find those reasons compelling or not, but I've thought about them a lot. And maybe there's a part of me that wishes that isn't how life was, and that you could just have a casual relationship with someone and then trade them in on someone better if they happen to come along. But I just don't believe that's delusional to believe that, at best. And it
is delusional.
Machiavellian, psychopathic, and narcissistic, and criminal at worst. And so
the way that a marriage works is because it's the journey. It's not just the reaction that you have with someone at the beginning that gives you these feelings that you interpret as love. Most of those feelings are actually, that reaction is called infatuation. We use the word love to describe too many different things, and we overuse it. What real love is that you accept the person, you welcome the person, you invite them into your presence, you always like them, and you choose to give them grace. You choose to have faith in the fact that the relationship that you have with that person over and over and over again, over time, and the journey that you're going with them on is better than the possibilities that the whole rest of the world has. That person over there that you see certain things about and go, well, maybe I could have a really great relationship. Maybe they would be a great person for me. The consistency and the commitment and the relationship and the experience and that bond and that love that you have with the person that you're married to is far greater than the imagination of what you could have with that other person that's over there. You should analyze your own marriage if you're in one of, do I have a healthy marriage or not? And there's 3 questions that you need to ask yourself to determine whether you have a healthy or viable marriage. Question number 1, do you want the marriage to work? Question number 2, are you willing to do whatever it takes in order to make the marriage work? And then 3, are you able to make the marriage work? And ability has 2 parts. First part, do you know what it will take to make your marriage work? Yes or no? And then if you do know, then are you capable of doing the things that it takes to make your marriage work? So if the answer is yes, I do know, and yes, I am capable, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make the marriage work, and I want to make the marriage work. If you and your spouse both answer yes to all those questions, you have a viable marriage. You probably have a healthy marriage. But if either one of you doesn't want the marriage to work, it will not work. If either one of you is not willing to do what it takes in order to make the marriage work, it will not work. Then the third question, though, is where marriage counseling can come in. Do you know what it will take to make the marriage work? Because if you're, hey, I want my marriage to work, I'm willing to make it work, it's just not working, and I don't know why. Great. That's why you go to marriage counseling. Even if we have this friction that we can't seem to get past and this is not working. I want it to work. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, but it's just not working. I don't know that we're able. Well, do you know what it will take to make your marriage work? And then are you able to do it? For an alcoholic, for example, a lot of times it's very clear. I want my marriage to work. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I know what it will take, but I'm not able to do what it takes. Because if I'm the alcoholic and I can't or won't quit drinking, or if they're the alcoholic and I can't or won't tolerate them drinking because they can't quit drinking, a lot of times an alcoholic has to get a divorce for that very reason, because they can't quit drinking and their spouse can no longer live with the alcoholic. And those are the most sad and disappointing type of divorces that there are, when people just won't make that choice. Sometimes they just refuse. They say, I want the alcohol and I don't care. Well, then that's not a person who is willing to do whatever it takes. If you're not willing to do whatever it takes, that's an indication that you're not 100% into the marriage. And in order for a marriage to work, you have to be 100% all in. And that's an intentional choice. It's not a result or a feeling where you go, oh, no, I promise, I really feel like I'm 100% in. No, it's not a feeling, it's a decision. I am 100% in. I know it. I've decided it. I'm intentionally deciding it. I'm doing it on purpose. And that's what it takes in order to have a healthy marriage. This is the Lawyer Dana Show.